I'm Christiana Gaudet, and I want to welcome you to Christiana's Psychic Café. With me is Tabitha Dial. Hi, Tabitha. How are you?
I'm excellent today.
It is so great to have you here. Welcome to Christiana's Psychic Café.
It's an honor, truly.
Well, it is so nice to meet you. And, I was trying to figure out, how you got onto my radar. That's the whole social media thing, is suddenly someone ends up on your radar. And I can't even remember how that happened, obviously through the online tarot community.
I would say it's probably because I found you either through this show or the online tarot community, and I reached out and said, hey, you're awesome. I remember I read Fortune Stellar, and I love that book. I still have it around. I break it open every now and then. It's very helpful, and I had reached out to you, and you were so responsive. So that's where I think our relationship started.
Awesome. So, for people who want to write a book, this is a really good point. Write a book, make new friends. It's a great thing.
Yeah.
So, and then it turned out you and I have both been honored in the same way, in that we're both having our poetry published in the anthology that's coming out. I know, how exciting. And I haven't really officially announced this beyond a little blurb in my newsletter. I haven't announced it. So here's the announcement. Both you and I are going to be in Arcana, the Tarot Poetry Anthology. And if I may, I'm just going to read the description on this, because, how awesome are we that this is happening? Okay. Arcana, the Tarot Poetry Anthology, will be a diverse collection of poetry by famous writers as well as undiscovered voices in the community. So which are we? Are we famous writers or undiscovered voices?
Maybe in between. Famous in our own right.
Yeah, there you go.
Right.
There you go. The anthology will be published by Minor Arcana Press in 2015. And, this is from the Tarot Poetry website, and I'll put the link right here so everyone can see it, tarotpoetry.wordpress.com. This is where you can follow the progress of this book. And, Tabitha, you and I are in some great company here.
And WordPress blog is amazing. She is interviewing one poet a month, so I highly recommend it. And she's a great person, too, the editor.
Do you know her personally?
About as much as I know you. It's one of those things where hey, I love what you do. This is me, I'm Tabitha, So it's that online buddy friendship kind of.
Great.
Yeah.
So you know her better than I do, and I cannot even remember how the submission thing came across. I mean, it was just something that flew by my screen. I was like, oh, tarot poetry, I have some of that. Mm-hmm. And the deadline, I remember, was incredibly inconvenient in my life. I almost blew it off because I did not have time for one more thing. And I was like, okay, so this is lesson number 2 for entrepreneurs. Don't blow stuff off.
Yeah, especially when it fits your niche. That is a huge lesson. Yeah, and that's why I'll just out myself as a tea leaf reader, because I knew, like you were saying, everybody and their grandmother will read tarot and is familiar with tarot, but tea leaf reading is kind of unique. So that's why I decided, okay, I'm going to mix that in there too.
And I'm so glad, and in our conversation today, I really want to talk about that, because as you say, it is such a unique thing. I too, we have so much to accomplish in the time we have together. You had suggested that we both share some of our poetry, which I'm completely nervous about, but I think is a great idea. I'm not nervous about your poetry, I'm nervous about mine. So I want to talk about that. I want to talk about tea leaf reading, and I have some very specific questions about that for you.
Okay.
But first, let's start at the beginning. You're a poet. You're a tarot reader, you're a tea leaf reader. What else are you? Where did it all start? I mean, I want to hear it all. And obviously, you're young. Can we start with that? How old are you?
I just turned 35 on Sunday, so I think this is going to come out a week after that.
Okay, so you're younger looking, actually. I mean, not that you're not young, but you're really young looking.
Yeah, thank you. It runs in the family, too. So,
Was there a time you hated that?
No, Because I guess when I was young, it didn't stand out. But as an adult, yeah, there's that more youthful vibe, and it's great. So
Yeah, that's
yeah.
awesome. Awesome. So tell me everything. Where did it start? How did it start?
I would say I just have always been very creative and imaginative, kind of spacey. I loved to spend time outdoors and kind of stare at I'd like to sit in the cherry tree and stare at the ants crawling all over the bark. And I think I was just trying to maybe figure out their story, and in a way that's reflected in like cloud gazing and then tea leaf reading. Now, my grandmother, who I was really close to, she was an artist, and we would talk often about the nuances of cloud painting. And so I took a lot of lessons about how to express things and look at things from her. And she also used to write poetry, but she would do it where she memorized it and she'd fall asleep thinking she'd remember. She'd wake up and she'd be like, Tabitha, you have to write down the poems that you invent. And so that's how that happened. Also, that grandmother introduced me to the concept of tea leaf reading. I never was formally taught, but we would sometimes go to a Chinese restaurant and she would occasionally order the tea there. And sometimes, this happened maybe twice or more, I can remember her looking at that big kettle and just telling little stories. And I was like, okay, what are you doing? Will you teach me? So yeah, that's where that seed was planted.
Wow. Where did she start doing that? Do you know?
The legend is that her grandmother, well, it's not a legend, her grandmother is Cherokee, but the legend is that her grandmother taught her how to read tea leaves, but primarily geomancy, so like the whole world and any patterns you see there. Yeah, pretty juicy.
Yeah. So is that a Native American practice?
I would say it probably is. I can't exactly speak to that, but I would say it's probably there. Yeah.
And I love that. And we talk about this in the community a lot too, the idea that you can really read anything.
Mm-hmm.
But and that leads to lots of jokes about scat scrying and all other kinds of things. And I think I can say this on a YouTube channel. We all prefer tea to shit, right? I mean, really. But I think the tea. The aspect of tea, and I know people read coffee grounds and other kinds of food things. And maybe this is just me. My parents were Anglophiles. We spent a lot of time in Great Britain. And so tea is a sacred thing, is it not?
Yeah.
My daughter, in fact, is general manager for Tivana, so I get great tea. I really do. But let me ask you, theoretically, we recognize that you can find the patterns in anything. As you say, ants crawling, clouds, the earth, tea, coffee, whatever. Is there something special about tea? And as a tea leaf reader, is there a particular kind of tea you like to use?
I love it. I'm still exploring those answers. I think there is something very special about tea because you can watch it unfold as it's steeping, and it's an experience between two people, traditionally.
Yes.
I have kind of a different spin on that for convenience sake, usually.
Yes.
And favorite tea right now, maybe I'll just go with the last one that I drank. I did some Russian Caravan, which is actually really bitter. And I added to it some blood orange tea, which is a blend from English tea leaves down in Parker, Colorado, where I lived for a while, where my parents live now. And it's a great English couple who run that tea shop. It's a really cool place. And it's the blood orange tea. I've been meaning to make a video of it for Instagram, which is another entrepreneurial thing. Instagram rocks, guys. Should use it. Find me. I'm Tabitha Dial there. And I make little videos already, but I want to make one where it just shows this beautiful blood orange tea steeping, because not only do the leaves open, but it like bleeds the orange. It does have some orange in it, and then it just also has this billowing orange that comes out like a dye. It's beautiful.
So let me ask you then, when we talk about the divination process.
Yes.
I know that, again, one could divine anything, but as you're steeping, are you starting the divination process when you steep? Or do you wait until after the cup is empty to begin the actual process of divination?
I often will start if I have that person right across from me, uh, because it's nice to get that conversation going, and I don't want to give the impression that I'm one of those psychic scam artists who's just trying to get hits and asking personal questions about their lives or whatever.
Right.
It's rather, oh, look, okay, this is kind of shaping into this. Did you see that? And most recently, a woman saw a rooster in the top of the leaves that were swirling around. So that was a fun kind of discussion.
That is really cool. Okay, so we're going to come back. I'm going to put a pin in tea leaf reading for a moment because I have so many questions. We're going to come back to that. How did tarot come into your life?
Oh, that came in through the back door, kind of sneaky, through the mail, actually, because I would get, like the Celtic New Age kind of catalogs, and I don't know why. I think maybe my mom was into Celtic stuff for me, and then it ended up floating over my way, which makes sense. And I would just kind of gather those into my arms and read them in the bedroom. It's like, oh, what are these cards? They look so extraordinarily beautiful, but they're also used for what? You could tell the future? Ooh, it's like, and nobody else in my family that I knew of had encountered them or used them. So there was all this mystery, and I had to explore it. And went to Crystal Bookstore. I grew up in Grand Junction. That's the store that's still there. That was like 15 at least years ago. Yeah, almost 20 years ago.
Wow.
And it's the same deck, yeah.
And that's your same deck?
Uh-huh.
Oh my gosh, that's wild. Now you are reading professionally at this point, yeah?
Yes, I have begun reading professionally.
Wonderful, both tarot and tea leaves?
Yep.
Okay, and so we'll talk about that. So you would say you're really in the process of building your practice at this time?
Yes.
Okay. And so have you always been a poet?
Oh, yeah. I'd say for long years I have been. I struggled a little bit with it. I'll be honest about that. I was a short story writer for a long time, and again, it goes back to the backyard, and I'd just be writing for hours, and it was always about, like, cats and foxes, even though I never saw a fox back where I grew up. I don't know, I guess I liked foxes. Should explore that a little, I guess.
Yeah, I'm going to say.
Yeah, there's something there.
Yeah.
And at one point, I encountered Emily Dickinson. And I realized, wow, she's pretty cool. It took me a long time. It was a big struggle, like adjusting to a new prescription of glasses when you haven't gone with a new prescription for a while. And but then when everything got into focus, it was in sharp focus through Emily Dickinson, and I was like, okay. And this is pretty early age, maybe 9 even, to approach that kind of writing. And I realized, oh, she had like 1,776 poems or whatever it was. I'm going to reach that goal. So I just wrote out, all these extensively long, silly poems, and I surpassed that goal of just producing all of it. So it's kind of like that 10,000 hours phenomenon. And then I decided, I'm done with poems. Going to go back to like fiction and nonfiction. I want to be the great American author kind of thing. And then in college, I had to take some not prerequisites, but part of my writing degree required me to be in poetry. I'm like, but I loved it. And so now it's like more my identity than those other forms of writing.
So you're comfortable identifying yourself as a poet?
Oh, that's one of my first and foremost most identities, yes.
Wow. And now you have a regular job too, don't you?
Oh, yeah.
Can you share what that is?
Oh, it's awesome. I work in specialty cheese. There are Kroger stores around the country who were approached actually by Murray's Cheese Shop up in New York City. They've been established since 1940 and they're still around. And I guess Murray's Cheese approached Kroger about getting together and having Murray's Cheese Shops in different Kroger stores that could support that demographic. And so I get to do that, and it's very fun.
Just saying, I realize this is a little bit of a leap, but it is interesting that your job does involve communication, integration, a certain amount of creativity. I mean, we can see how certain skills kind of go across, how do tea leaf reading and tarot reading connect to what you're doing? There is sort of a connection.
There's a big connection, I think.
Yeah.
Helping people identify what they want, helping them pair it with what they need. Yeah. Like, who do they want to share their life with? Well, this cheese is good for that. If you have a broken heart, well, this tea leaf reading will help with that.
You know, that's so funny. Years ago, I used to sell flowers on a street corner in New Haven, Connecticut, right outside of Toad's Place, which is still there, this huge nightclub. And that was the thing, is I would work Friday nights, Saturday nights, and I was definitely selling flowers to get people laid. And that was very, very true. So maybe it's all about that, whether it's tarot, it's tea, it's flowers, it's cheese. At the end of the day, maybe that's what it's all about. I don't know.
Spreading the love.
That's it. So, tarot poetry. You're a poet, you read tarot. How did tarot poetry come about for you?
Out of necessity. So after I graduated with that degree in writing, which I adored, I was able to use the writing degree, which wasn't journalism, to get a journalism job for a couple years, which was very fun and vibrant. But I got a bit burnt out from that, and I decided, oh, you remember that poetry class that I'd been dreading? Well, I remember also sitting there and suddenly a light went off and was like, I want to do this. This could be my life, to be a poetry professor. And that came back to me. And so I decided to get a master's in poetry. And as part of the thesis, to graduate, you have to put together a book-length collection of poems. First theme, I wanted a theme. I had to have a theme. And the first one I thought about was birds. And I thought about fairy tales. And they just weren't feeling very vital to me. They weren't generative, you know. And I was like, oh yeah, I have that tarot deck. Why don't I bust that open?
And now let me ask you, this is huge because, you know, tarot poetry is a thing historically. And we'll talk about that in a minute. Did you recognize that tarot poetry was a thing? Did you recognize that one of the origins of tarot divination comes from poetry? Did you know all that, or did in your head?
I don't think that was consciously there.
That was not consciously, cognitively there. And doesn't this happen so often in tarot that we know what to do with it, even if we don't know the history? And of course, this is the argument against interpretive reading, and I hate to make that argument because you know I'm all down with the study. But it is true that you don't have to know stuff about tarot to know stuff about tarot. And you just proved that. So where did you go from there? You decided that the theme would be this tarot deck. What happens next?
And it was perfect because my advisor, it was his first year and my first year, and he was already, you know, kind of familiar with the tarot poetry territory, so he was able to guide me towards some of those resources, in fact. He was like, well, T.S. Eliot.
Oh, gosh, yes.
Yeah, and actually in this book that I got I later was able to present a paper on the whole process of writing the thesis and kind of how it helped me kind of understand my individuation and things. And I got it published in this anthology, Tarot and Culture.
Wow, wonderful.
I was lucky enough to present that paper too, but there was a reason I was going to say this. Oh, that was part of my research was, you know, trying to find tarot poetry, and that's when I saw the call for papers for that conference, which led to this. So again, entrepreneurs, look up the stuff you're interested in that you know is unique to you. It's going to open so many doors. And now I've got friends through this book too.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's huge.
It is pretty huge.
It is huge. Wow. I love it. I love it. So as far as the anthology that's coming out, Arcana, the Tarot Poetry Anthology, how did you approach submitting to them? How did you choose the poems you were going to submit? How did that all go?
I think I approached it as, oh good, it's another time to look at that manuscript again, or the thesis, with fresh eyes, because it had been a while. Mm-hmm. That had been finished in 2009. So yeah, it'd been like 5 years. So look at it again, and then just make sure I'm not submitting anything already published. Yeah, and then like, okay, well, which are the ones that I really like? And I also, you know, read with the call for submissions, it was like, you know, we also want stuff from the minor arcana, because that's one of the rare poems. You know, most people go for the majors because they're so dominant, easy, and so rich, I think. So I went with minors and some stuff that I'd like kind of just really conjured, because the 2 poems that I got published, they're called Two of Wounds, and you may know there's no suit called the Wounds.
I like it.
The other one breaks the rule by being the Ace of Knights.
Wow. You're out there.
With a K. Knights with a K. Yeah. Well, you know, and actually it was my advisor, Dan Beachy Quick at Colorado State University, who encouraged me to go out there. You know, to not just stay within the 78 cards, but to mix things up. And at one point he said something along the lines of like, okay, well now take any of these poems and read them as like a 3-card spread. And that was really cool. And that poem that was successful with that exercise ended up in the book that I had showed you.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's so huge.
So there's so many ideas, yeah.
Wow. You know, no, I'm just thinking, when we talk about historically tarot poetry and being outside of the box, which is such the opposite of mine. You know, I'm writing 1 poem for each of those 78 cards, you know, like really structured, which is so funny because I'm not a very structured person. But if we think about it, looking at T.S. Eliot, of course, when he talks about the drowned sailor and the pearls that were her eyes, that's not a reference to a tarot card. I know all 78 cards, and that's not there. There is no drowned sailor with pearls.
There is an academic paper actually in that, I think it's also in volume 2 of Tarot, that explores it in detail. It is well written. I think Leslie Strainer is the author of it. It's awesome.
So can you
she wrote the Harry Potter and Tarot one.
Really? Oh, that's so interesting. So what did she have to say about that? Do you remember?
Which one, Harry Potter or T.S. Eliot?
T.S. Eliot.
T.S. Eliot, I remember that she looked at about 6 different scholars and their interpretation of each of the cards, and she decided it was a full Celtic cross spread, as many of the other scholars believed. And she was able to designate each card, and there's talk about a little bit of argument between 2 different cards here and maybe there. But yeah. Wow,
that is so interesting. I love that. I love that so much.
And the Tarot and Culture is available as a download to Kobo too, I think.
Really? Yeah. Okay, so I know I'm going to be getting my copies, so everyone else should as well. So that is pretty cool. Okay, so at this point, since we're talking about the poetry and we have so much else we want to talk about, let's go ahead and share a little. Are you able and willing at this point to read for us?
Always, sure. Well, we're on that note of nights that are all mixed up. This is one that's going to be in the Arcana anthology, along with your work. And just because he happened to be the first knight I found.
Okay.
It's also significant in the paper that's published. So, Ace of Knights. They borrow all their secrets for a kingdom. They surrender all their armor to the safest banner. Each confuses queens who it is they want to die. And what was kind of interesting about this poem, as I was reciting it for you guys, is the white space and how the use of white space comes into play. I thought, well, that's kind of like cards and how different cards will. Do you want?
Yeah, no, I'm playing with this.
Yeah, how different cards will show up, and then your relationship to a poem can change over time, because here I had a line break, and it makes they want to die the last line, and I realized, well, okay, as I probably lived with this poem, did I realize that could insinuate that the they is the they here and the knights.
Right.
Or is it the queens that they're going to attack and the kingdom they're going to take over?
Right.
Yeah.
Wow. And you know, that's such a good point, too. I had one of my poems published in a tarot book I wrote as an example of tarot creativity. And I really had to work with the editor that, you can't just jumble that up for space. It's got to be like she understood editing a technical manual. She did not understand the formatting of a poem and how different that is. So the point is good. So that's one that is being published. So you're having two published. I am too. Both of mine, I think, that are being published are minor arcana as well. So that was the secret. That was how we got in with the minor arcana.
Read those calls for submissions carefully, guys.
Right.
Go. Letter, how they want it submitted. I mean, editors see so many stinking submissions. You want to make sure you make them happy and make their jobs easy.
That is so true. That is so true. Absolutely.
Yeah, I've been on that end of the stick, so.
Absolutely. So, do the majority of your poems not rhyme? Rhyme? Do you write with particular meter? How does that all work for you?
I do not rhyme, if I can help it. Sometimes it accidentally happens.
So much does, yeah.
Yeah. But the modern poetry really does not rhyme. As far as meter goes, modern poetry doesn't necessarily pay attention to that either. No. So I've kind of cast that aside for 10 years or more. More than 10 years, yeah. It's so funny. When I started, like the very first poem I ever wrote, I was 8. And it rhymed, of course, kids love rhyme. But as it turns out, I love rhyme. And the sad fact of the matter is, most of my tarot poetry is freaking doggerel. That's all it is, really. But I have so much fun with it. I'm just cool with it. When I was young, I expected that I would grow up to be a great poet. I expected that. And I didn't love Emily Dickinson, but I loved, who I loved? I loved Adrienne Rich. I loved sort of that whole crop of feminist poets. As I was coming up in the 1970s, that was like huge. Ellen Bass was another that I liked very much. Marge Piercy, who also wrote about tarot, and I love her fiction too. But also T.S. Eliot, E. Cummings, all of them, of course, Dylan Thomas. But my writing of tarot poetry was very accidental. It's funny, yours was by necessity. Mine was completely by accident. I like your story, and I think it's very relatable. And I think it's also kind of an imperative to people who are on their journeys. Do you want to tell people why you got into your 78?
Oh my gosh, yeah, I will. And in fact, the big poem that started, it's not even a big poem, it's just, in my mind, it's a big poem because it's still my favorite. It was the one that started the whole project, and it was so organic, and it is one that has been chosen for the anthology.
Good.
Yeah, it's the 8 of Cups, and I'm actually not going to read it today. I'm gonna let people either look for it or wait for it. But yeah, it was the death of my mother, my poor mother. In my entire life of knowing my mother, she had never spent a day in the hospital. But at age 64 was diagnosed with cancer and died very quickly thereafter. It was, harsh and shocking. For me, as a professional psychic, it was devastating. There are, literally tens, maybe hundreds of people who credit me with saving their lives because I saw something and I said, go to the doctor, gets this checked out. Mm-hmm. And they call, Christiana, you saved my life. So one day I'm looking at my mother's hand and I see a health crisis. And I say, you know what? There's a health crisis coming. We talked about that. And then she asked me some other questions. I got out my cards. I gave her a reading. And I didn't realize how prophetic the reading was. She was very concerned about her mother, my grandmother, for whom she cared. And she was thinking, how much longer am I going to be able to do this caregiving? She's getting worse. She was a recent widow. She didn't want to spend the rest of her life doing caregiving. And in the reading, it came up that she didn't need to worry about that. She did not need to worry about caring for her mother for years and years.
Oh my gosh.
And so when she got diagnosed, that was the phone call. She called me up and she said, "Whose death were you seeing?" But I hadn't even made that connection, you know? And so by the time she was diagnosed, she was stage 4, and I took it personally. I really thought that I should have been able to see it earlier, to get her to a doctor earlier. It was freaking lung cancer, you know? In retrospect, I was just torturing myself. But we psychics do that, you know? We think that because we can see things, that we should be able to see everything. And we forget that, you know, we're not always able to make a change.
Yeah, you can only give so much information, and then it's up to that person to digest it. Yeah.
That's it. And so, you know, this is my mother's, this was it. So anyway, a few years go by, and I am still in this real place of grief. So I wrote this poem about the 8 of Cups. And for me, oh, you are so good. God, you were good. I'll have to pay you for that later. So for me, the 8 of Cups, and you've got the card held up there so people can see it. Cups are related to the element of water, about emotion. And so I saw this person going to the beach and really taking an inventory of their sorrow and their grievances and their anger at higher power, and really pouring that into those cups and then walking away from it. And I knew that was the process I had to do, that I had to acknowledge my grief and walk the heck away from it. And in writing that poem, I was able to do so. So if you want to read that poem, you can go to my website, or you can buy the book, and I hope you do. But that's how it started. And I thought, well, that was helpful. And I wasn't interested in publication. I wasn't interested in being a great poet at that point. I was just interested in, this is another way we can use tarot to heal. And so I'm probably 2/3 of the way through the deck now and stalled out. I haven't written a tarot poem in 2 years.
Well, I bet you that getting that book is going to just make your ideas go. Because one of my, well, really my favorite poetry professor, she said something like, good poets borrow and steal. You just got to twist it and make it your own, you know?
That's true. That's true.
A couple words here, you know? So yeah, I love reading other poets, and I'm like, oh, that's cool. I want to do a poem in that form. I want to do a poem that starts with that particular kind of sentence, you know?
Right. That's true. That's a good point. That's a very good point. So do you have another one to share?
Okay. Let's see. Okay, I'll read The Empress.
Oh, that's funny, and then I'll read my Empress. Perfect.
Cool.
Perfect.
Two
Good.
Empresses.
Yay.
Yeah, and really, I will say, you know, as I had to like go through all of the cards, and the impression I have from you, Christiana, is that you've not yet tackled a lot of these babies.
I have done no queens. That's
Yeah,
I don't think I've done any of them.
They kept staring at me, you know, and they're like, we are part of you, you are part of us. And like, okay, well, you're a little alien at the same time. But the Empress was very much, she's more cozy and relaxed and things like that. She became kind of the poem that launched 1,000 other poems for my thesis, and became kind of a costume I could wear, so to speak, in my journey. Because, well, I'll just read the poem.
Okay.
The Empress. My luscious most place to sit, at first. Pillows, textures, sun and blood bright. But my shoulder aches for an armrest, my back for a throne. I have nothing, stare at it. Fields endless of wheat, endless wheat, fields endless. Sky more or less non-blue. My face taints some color. My lips taint into some shade. When I turn to the woods, nothing more than the wheat uncurling. The trees behind stitch me green to yellowed sky. The brook drags slow to waterfall. I must empire this harvest.
Wow. That is fabulous. Oh my gosh.
That last line's my favorite.
Yeah. Well, good turning a noun into a verb.
Let's do that. With a last name like Dial.
I know you could have so much fun with that marketing. You could have a really good time with that.
Yeah.
So, okay, so wow. That was fabulous. That really knocked my socks off. And I can see that and this is a great thing about tarot poetry is you can do so much with it. In that, it looks like you really put yourself in the card, and that poem to me is actually a piece of tarot magic. In the same way that writing the Eight of Cups was magic and healing for me, this is magic for you in creating your harvest. Am I right?
Yeah, and I mean, and in reading your poem was magic for me too. So it's tarot should be fun to write as well as read.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Magic.
It is, and I think it's interesting that there is such a connection between tarot and writing. Years ago, I had a teacher who said, if you're going to be a tarot reader, you must be a tarot writer.
Yeah.
And I think you and I mean, I don't know that everyone would agree with this, but I think you and I would agree, wouldn't we?
Yeah.
So I took an entirely different shift with the Empress. I was looking at the Empress in terms of how she constantly comes up in readings. And she is such a conundrum for me in that the Empress speaks to me, and again, this is operational. This is not what I would teach when I teach a class about the Empress or whatever. No, this is operational. What I think about when I see the Empress in a reading, and how that happens all the freaking time, and what it makes me think about what could higher power have possibly been thinking when they designed this was my question. Because, right, thank you, yes. It occurs to me in my work that we all spend most of our lives recovering from the first 20 years.
Ooh, yeah.
It's the mother wound. It is. And that as mothers, and I'm a mother, as mothers, we love our children fiercely. And no matter how hard we try not to, we still screw them up. Every one of us will give our children something to tell their therapists. And so having already healed a lot of my own mother stuff with the Eight of Cups, I'm looking at the Empress and I'm saying, what the heck? 9 times out of 10, when it comes up in a reading, in my work, either you're grieving your dead mother, or you're not talking to your mother because she screwed you up, or you're a mother and you're worried about your kids, but it's usually something freaking negative. Unless it's not negative, but it's an issue. It's a family issue. Unless you're pregnant, the Empress will also be if you're pregnant, but 9 times out of 10, maybe you didn't want that either, or you're having fertility issues. You want to have a baby and you can't. So we're so tied up around mothers and children, and yet so often on the tarot table, the issues we're dealing with aren't happy ones. And all of that for me is tied up in this card. So, here's what I had to say about it.
Let's hear it.
Okay. Easy to create, but hard to sustain. Wanted or not, life wants to be. As common as dirt, brought in blood and pain, the mother knot formed perfectly. Uniquely human, both sinner and saint, reflection of divinity.
Nice.
Yeah.
Reading that, and I really liked your use of the mother knot especially, but also the dirt, the sinner and saint. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's not with a K, we should say, right?
It is with a K.
Yeah, like a Gordian knot is
Yes.
kind of what I thought too.
Yes.
It's like,
Yes.
yeah. And yeah, she used to puzzle me a lot more than she does now. And I think it's because I used that poem and then she became kind of a character. I mean, I wrote a whole series of 10 poems. I created my own suit at one point. Actually, a couple different suits. Well, I had all this time to write these poems. And it was I kind of let her be the protagonist in this story where she went from the ace to the 10. So actually it wasn't all the way to the king and everything. I cut out the courts. But it still was a way to have her live through a whole story. And it was fun to have a different vibe to each of those little chapters. So in a way, I guess I kind of married back to the short stories and wanting to write fiction.
Nice.
That's kind of cool. Yeah.
Nice. That is fabulous.
Can I interject something?
Yes. Yes.
All right. So we've been using our trusty Rider-Waite-Smith.
Yes.
Which can be sometimes baffling or difficult for some people. And I was thinking about it, I was like, well, if this Ace of Cups doesn't really do anything for people, of course they might have their own deck. Please write from your own deck. But I was thinking, ooh, that's gorgeous.
Ooh, this is one of the things I love about Chrysalis Tarot. I love the mirrors for cups. I like the scrolls for swords, sort of.
Uh-huh.
I don't know. Are you a Chrysalis fan?
I am becoming a fast Chrysalis fan for my own readings and for readings for other people when they have something to heal or a big question. I feel it's really appropriate. But I have to take a lot of time to absorb it and sit with it. But yeah, this seems like such a positive message versus that's still kind of like, okay, you gotta figure out your spot and what you're gonna do to tackle that, You know
what? So, hold those two up again. I just had a thought. And I really now want to share this with Tony Brooks and Holly Sierra, the creators of Chrysalis. What I see, just for the first time, I've not seen this before, but the Five of Scrolls with the sword in it, it reminds me of Martin Luther nailing his theses to the church door. Like, that's the way it is, damn it, and I'm done.
Yeah, nice.
I like it, yeah.
That's good for fives because it's always a matter of, okay, what are you going to accept?
So let's talk now about tea leaf reading. Okay, we talked a little before about how you got there and all of that. I want to talk about it operationally. I'm very interested in the logistics and the operation of this. And my whole thought, I used to run a psychic fair, and I had one reader who was a tea leaf reader, and he was awesome. Mm-hmm. But he had to work so hard. He had to lug around all of this. I mean, most of us could just show up 5 minutes beforehand with our cards and we're good to go. He had to boil water. He had to wash dishes. He had to bring dishes. He had to bring tea. There's all of this. And so number one, how the heck do you handle all the logistics? If you're doing tea leaf reading, tell us about the venues you do this in and how it works logistically.
Well, don't you know that all poets have a massive entourage and roadies? No. I do have like rolling luggage. So that's how I carry the kettle, things like that. The tea I have in just, the nice pouches that you can get at any tea shop. So those are sealed nicely, and I bring my teaspoon and really 1 or 2 saucers at most, 2 cups at most, and a big roll of paper towels. And I wrap the paper towels with that sarong in this case, or that cloth that you're going to lay out
right.
on your table anyway. Right. That way your paper towels don't get torn up as you put them in your rolling luggage.
Right.
So that's kind of how I try to keep everything compact. And then I always, make sure beforehand, if it's a fair, I'm going to need electricity. And, so I have to pay for that in many cases, which is just fine, and to anticipate that and, to let them know I really don't want people tripping over the cord, which in most cases, fairs know to be practical about that.
Right.
Yeah. That's essentially how I've done it at fairs. And then I have read in the past at a metaphysical store, and then I just kind of had my own corner, so I just, schlep all my stuff and set myself up. And of course you gotta have your timer and your own water to drink. But the trick is, washing dishes, I'll use the paper towels to just wash 1 teacup at a time. and go back and forth between the two cups.
Right.
Because I don't really like to serve tea to someone, because sometimes I guess I could just stick to teas that I know are safe for people to drink. But I went and got a book that got me all excited about all the different kinds of tea I could get. So
they don't actually drink the tea?
Not in my...
So, start to finish. Okay,
So
I'm your client.
yeah,
Go ahead.
Absolutely. In my approach, I don't have them drink the tea. Sometimes people aren't big fans of tea, or they're concerned about caffeine, things like that. But I'll just, and I made a video actually that explains all this too. But yeah, I'll just have the teacup, and sometimes I'll let them select between a few different types. But basically, just use about a teaspoonful. Let it steep for the 3 minutes, and instead of them drinking it, the way they transfer their energy is I'll have them put their hands alongside or atop it. And then I also put a little strainer in there that's concave, that fits the cup, and then I have them stir it with my teaspoon, so it's a magical teaspoon. Set it aside, and then I pour all that into another cup. And then we tip the cup over and look into the cup to see what's left.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah,
that actually...
That way, because I don't want people sitting there forever sipping the tea, especially if it's at a reading, waiting for it to cool, things like that.
Well, and these were the problems we ran into at the Psychic Fair, so I was curious. Now, I know that you are a tarot and tea leaf reader. Do you ever do both in the same reading?
Oh, yeah. Often there'll be somebody who is kind of curious about the tea leaf reading. I'll be like, okay, well, let's try it out. And if we have extra time and you still need clarity, I'll pull a couple cards. So we'll do that. There are tea leaf reading cards that you may be familiar with.
I have those.
Yeah, they're awesome. And I did one event at the Wildlife Experience Museum, which is a phenomenal museum here in Colorado. And it was just a whole night for a corporate event near the holidays. And I did my tea leaf reading cards as well as tarot cards. And we got into a rhythm where people would draw 4 of the tea leaf cards. And then one of them would be like, well, one of those cards would be kind of a outlier or wild card, and be like, well, what exactly does that mean? I want to know more about it. That's exciting. So I'd draw 3 individual tarot cards to kind of paint that picture.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Beautiful. So when we talk about tea leaf reading, and I think most people understand this, but maybe there are some who don't, and perhaps I need some clarity as well. I understand that much like cloud gazing or flame scrying, what you're seeing is shapes.
Mm-hmm.
And I've seen, I do follow you on Instagram. I love your Instagrams. And my favorite recently was Mario.
Yay!
And it was immediately, I knew that you were on the younger side. But my kids grew up with Mario, so that really sort of resonated for me. And the funny thing about the image was you could see, was it a mushroom he had to grab, or there was something? I mean, it really was, he had props.
It just looked like a block was right there.
Yeah. Right, that's what it was. Right.
Yeah.
And so I am sure that you will not find a set of tea leaf cards or a tea leaf book that will show you the Mario shape.
No, not yet anyway.
Not yet. Right, you'll have to write it. So how often are you looking for classic shapes, and how often is it just a matter of looking and seeing what you see?
Oh, that's a great question. I think it's kind of the first thing that pops into mind. And sometimes, that card, that image originally looked kind of angelic to me. And then it wasn't until later, after I looked at the picture I took, and I was like, oh man, that was Mario. And I wish that client was still around so I could tell her that. So if you were the person I read at Gnome's book, well, Denver, that's what it was.
That brings up such an interesting question for professional diviners, because regardless of the medium, we've all been there. Yeah. We've all been there. We've given the reading. It's a great reading. But then later on, you see something else. You think about the card. You think about the image. You say, oh, my gosh, there was this. Mm-hmm. And what do? if you are able to contact them, do you contact them and say, oh, by the way, I thought of this? Or do you just say, well, whatever happened in the sacred space of that reading was what was supposed to happen, and anything else is for the reader, not the readee? What do you think?
I think it's a boundary that you have to set for yourself, and every individual reader is going to need to be comfortable with that decision, you know?
That's a good point. That's a
Because
good point.
you can only give so much out there, you know?
Right. That's true. That's true. So, it feels like you are developing, right at the same time, you're developing your career as a writer, you're developing your career as a diviner. What are your goals? Where do you see all of this going for yourself?
I would love to have creative things out there, like not just, I know there's already so much written on creative writing prompts in tarot. Great resources already. But maybe there's something uncharted just yet towards poetry specifically, you know. Because I've already written one article as an introduction to writing tarot poetry, which is, feel free to look that up and enjoy that, guys. And which will give you some examples if you're excited about writing tarot poetry. It gives you some ideas and some examples, really simple techniques that'll also enhance your understanding of the cards. But yeah, as a writer and developing all this, I would like to just kind of keep exploring the themes. I mean, maybe do things that are kind of instructive for other people, but very playful, because it's kind of obvious. If I see Mario in the tea leaves, I got that spunky, silly edge to me. Yeah, and I'm also just kind of interested in continuing to be a part of the tarot community in a big way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, you're there in Colorado, and TarotCon is coming. Will you be going to TarotCon?
Oh, yeah. I'm so proud of Denver. Our tarot meetup group is the biggest in the country.
Wow.
I just checked it. There's 635 people.
That's huge.
Yeah.
That's huge. Good for you. So and we have just a few minutes left, but I'm also a tarot meetup organizer, and I believe in tarot meetups. And of course, I have to give a shout out to Farrell Humphrey, who is the one who turned me on to tarot meetups way back in 2007. So there's that. But tell us, what do you guys do to grow your meetup, and what do you do at your meetup events?
Oh, some awesome stuff has recently happened to grow it. Like just postcards, simple as that. There's also, we're very lucky in Colorado. We have quarterly, we have these celebration fairs that are in pretty big areas, like the Denver Merchandise Mart is one place, another place in Golden. It's just massive. About 6,000 people will come through over 2 or 3 days. And so we're given the opportunity as Denver Tarot Meetup members to, and I actually just did it today, to have like a little flyer, like a quarter size of a regular computer size sheet, to advertise yourself.
Perfect.
Right? And then, for 200 of those flyers, for $20, they will put your stuff in their goodie bags. So people who come by the Denver Tarot Meetup table, not only is there a laptop there to sign up and all these goodie bags, but they actually get to interact with real people and get encouraged to join Denver Tarot Meetup. And then things we do is there's a tarot social every weekend. We've got enough people to run that are excited about it. Yeah. Wow. So I think it's everywhere but west, but pretty much every direction is covered. Wow. We've got central, and then south, I know for sure. So that's really awesome. And then even on Sundays, we have, the first Sunday of the month, we have a Lenormand social.
Nice.
Yeah. Nice. And then every other Tuesday, we have regular meetups that are just kind of more formal and more structured for 2 hours to teach you about tarot from a different aspect, which is really exciting, going to one tonight. And then on the first Tuesdays, we've just started this program where it's, I want to call it Tarot Talk. It's so new, I haven't been there yet. But that's really exciting too, where it's just kind of like a sit-in, and this is going to be the topic for the day, and just kind of casually introduce it. What else do you have to add about it, everybody?
Perfect.
Yeah, so we're really good at teaching each other, contributing, supporting each other.
Oh, that is great.
Yeah.
And as part of your work, not only do you work locally, you also offer readings internationally. Is that true?
That is true, yeah. I just set up Etsy. It was a goal over Christmas. And actually, I was a little early, so Christmas Eve, I went live. It's like, yay!
Oh, that's awesome. So this is brand new. So a year ago, you couldn't do this, but now you can. You can get a reading with Tabitha Dial from anywhere in the world, essentially, yeah?
Yeah. And I took a cue from the Four Queens. She's kind of I love her. She's a mentor of mine, although she doesn't know it. And I took a cue from her, and now I lost my train of thought.
Etsy shop.
Etsy shop, yeah. And she just kind of influenced the shape of it, I guess I should say.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Beautiful, beautiful. So how can people find you there?
You could just search for Tabitha Dial.
Perfect.
The actual URL has tarot and tea readings, but that's different than my website, which is tarot and tea leaf readings. So
Got it. And we'll have both links available for people to see at the end of this video. So we are coming to the end of our time. Is there anything else you wanted to share with people? Anything else you want people to know?
I think if you're exploring your tarot poetry and you have a significator, I think that'd be really cool to explore that, kind of like what we did with the Empress.
Oh, good. Oh, and you had asked about the Queens and how I haven't written about the Queens, and in my mind I'm like, yeah, that means I didn't write about my significator because my significator.
Assignment. Yeah.
There you go. Okay, so do you have a significator who is a queen?
You know, it was the Queen of Wands for forever, and isn't that yours?
Yeah.
Yeah. But I'm understand. There's a lot of clues to me that I need to be Queen of Pentacles. This is a cup that my brother got me years ago.
Yeah, seriously.
Yeah, #1 sister. Yeah, and being a teacher now too is kind of tied to the Queen of Pentacles, I think.
What sign are you born under?
Pisces. Just.
So you could be the Queen of Cups.
Yeah. I think I'm everything right now.
And ideally we are.
I'm learning so much from swords right now. Really. That's my life lesson right now.
You know, as a writer, especially as a poet, I think the suit of swords, and of course tarotists are laughing right now because, you know, in most decks, the suit of swords is the most devastating. You've got your cards right there. Can you, I'll look through mine too. Let's just pull up some really ugly swords cards for people so they can really see what we're talking about. I'm going through as well.
Scare them at the end of this, gosh.
Oh, there you go. Okay, so those aren't so bad. I want to see the 9, the 10, here we go, the 10. There we go. There's swords for you. Yeah. And I think when we talk about writing poetry, I think writing by its very nature is a painful process. We who love to write do not love to write. It's not easy. It's pulling something out of you that doesn't want to come out, and it hurts. Yeah, there you go.
And I can do a headache to edit it.
And I think that oftentimes we do write poetry born of pain. And so, yeah, exactly. And so the suit of swords, of course, the suit of air. Yep, there you go. I think that air is about our thoughts, it's about our words, it's about our communication. But when we see how it comes together in the suit of swords, you know, could you call the suit of swords the suit of swords, the suit of poetry? Because not only is it about communication and thought and words, but it's also about the pain that I think you can't be a poet without having a certain amount of that.
Well, and you should remember to have confidence and take everything into your own hands. Yeah.
Absolutely.
You can write out of joy too. You shouldn't have to suffer.
That is so true, and you can have joy in your writing. And I think, you know, the Ace of Swords really is about those who delight in the truth. In fact, my nickname for the Ace of Swords is the anti-bullshit device.
Cool.
I know, right? Well, Tabitha Dial, it has been so nice, and we should disclose this is our very first conversation. We've emailed back and forth, we've Facebooked a bunch, we've Instagrammed. In fact, you're my Instagram coach, which I appreciate. But this is our very first conversation that we've now had in a very public forum, and I thank you so much for that. Congratulations to you for being in the Tarot Poetry Anthology, and for your Etsy shop. I know, right? For the Etsy shop, and for you doing all the dynamic stuff you're doing to really get yourself out there as a diviner, as a tarotist, as a poet. You're just doing a wonderful job, and you're inspiring a lot of people. Thanks for being here today, and keep up the good work.
Thank you.